got into TV in 1973, and I was hired to be a prop. I was young and good looking, and I had big breasts. And I was put into a TV newsroom at WBBM TV in Chicago, where it was an experiment where they were doing live broadcast in an active newsroom, and they needed someone behind the anchors to be answering the telephone and look good. So I was, out of college, a feminist, but I took the job and I made sure I was the best phone answerer they ever had. So that was my first job. Then I moved into radio, completely different. And that's where I learned how to be a broadcast journalist. It was a group of four young men who were young and progressive, and this was a progressive rock station in Chicago, and they hired me to be their news director. So I took the job, and they wanted me to do rock and roll news headlines throughout the day. And I said, no, we're going to do real news. And I got a Chicago wire service rented and hired some folks. And we did hard Chicago news. And that's where I learned the business. I learned how to write and splice tape, and I learned how to talk for broadcasting. And that's really where I got my chops. And I realized then it seemed like television was harder as a woman for me because it was all about mostly how you looked. And then in radio, it was really about skill and talent. And I thrived there. I wanted to be a TV reporter, and I got a job at King TV in Seattle. Here I am, a new reporter at King TV, covering the mayor who had just been the TV commentator at the station. He bans cameras, and I decide I'm going to go in with cameras rolling. And although it blew up and he blackballed me after that, and I lost the beat, the New York Times picked it up, and the headline was, "Former TV commentator turned mayor bans cameras." And that just pissed him off. It was years before we talked again, but I loved it. As I made my big splash in Seattle. Yeah. So that whole idea of, God, I got to be tough, it really backfired for me. And then at the same time, the news director at the time, he was holding court in the newsroom, and the people were gathered around him, and he grabbed me and pulled me down onto his lap and put his arm around me and started laughing. And other people were laughing uncomfortably. And you know what I did? Nothing. I giggled, and then I walked away, and I thought, that I got to figure out how to handle this too. I made a plan on how to handle jerk, sexist male colleagues and bosses. And I decided that I was going to treat them like little boys, and I was going to be their mom. And if they did something inappropriate, I would say, hey, I think you could find a better way of saying that, so you're not a jerk. And I kind of worked at it in the mom thing, and it worked out for me. I didn't get angry. I got control. In college, I was a feminist, and I went to all the rallies. I took part. Gloria Steinem and Jane Fonda came to the school, and I was there up in the front cheering them on. And I went to, classes where we were given things you could examine your own vagina. I mean, it was over the top, telling us how to be women and how to face the world that way. I was very much a feminist. So, but I hadn't really learned how to apply that as a woman in this field. And that's what I grappled with early on. And I just tried to get the hang of it. I think I did. Julie Blacklow in the King 5 newsroom, she came over to my desk one day and said, "Don't worry, you're going to make it. You're doing great." Just those few words, it meant a lot to me. I really felt like I had support, and maybe we were a handful of women then in a large newsroom. But that kind of encouragement from people who had come before me really made a difference. And she helped me to mold myself in what I wanted to be and how I wanted to present the news, and gave me a lot of courage. She mattered. My family laughed at me. I told them around the dinner table that I wanted to be a TV news reporter, and they burst out laughing. And my father said, "I've never seen you read a newspaper." And my brother said, "You don't even know who the vice president of the United States is. How are you going to do that?" But that didn't stop me. I just went ahead and did what I wanted to do. And in the early days of my being in the news business, my mother laughed and said, "Oh, you're just like Mary Tyler Moore."
Mr. Grant, I'll make the coffee for you if you like.
No, Mary, you're an associate producer. And anyway, we got this memo from personnel about how you treat women different. Don't give them those crummy little jobs like women are supposed to do.
Well, Mr. Grant, I really don't mind making it for you.
You see? You don't agree with that memo, do you?
Well, I sort of suggested it.
I thought, no, you're wrong. I'm nothing like Mary Tyler Moore, but I'm glad you're happy. They respected what I did. And I would take them to Bring Your Daughter to Work Day. And I think they thought I was cool. And, it was tough having kids while you're working. But boy, I was proud coming home. When I came home, though, after stories, I didn't talk about work. It was I turned it off at the dinner table. I'm sure you did too. But I think I set a good example for them on how to be a good citizen, and that's what they became. And when I became a mom, I learned so much about the people I was covering, and just their fears, love, and vulnerabilities. And that's when I really learned not to try to replicate somebody I had grown up watching, a man growing up being a tough guy news reporter. But I learned about how to write with compassion. And that changed everything for me. I became a much better journalist. I did not feel any discrimination because I was a woman. I felt I was with a family. There were more and more women joining the newsroom as time went on. We had a boss, Mrs. Bullitt, who was progressive, charismatic, charming, loving. We all felt like we were a team, and we had a common goal, and we wanted to do the news right. My job in the newsroom was described to me as the infantry.
The news that the trade talks have broken down is viewed as a victory by the protesters who are here outside of the King County Jail. About 300 of them now gathered.
I would go in, do the story, get the facts, gather the pictures, get it on the news that night. So first in, first out. And then maybe a follow-up the next day if warranted. But then the following day, I'm off doing another thing where I'm first in, get it on the news, fast.
Forecasters overestimated the need for nuclear power.
Take two strong arms to cut through some of this grass.
This darn weather is so unpredictable. Who can tell what it's going to be like any minute? You've got to be prepared.
Friday, the Whoops board will rubber stamp the Bonneville decision.
And I enjoyed that role because it was fast moving. And then those stories that needed deeper examination, they were turned over to the investigative team. And then I kept my pace of being first in. And it was worked. It worked for me. I was doing a story about how more women and children were homeless and in Seattle shelters. And I interviewed a woman at a shelter who was a mother, and she had a child in grade school and a child in high school. And she poured her heart out about wanting to do right for her kids and find a home for them. And when I left the interview, I came back to the station. The news was on fire because a high school student had been shot first time at a Seattle public school, and it was her child. I had been interviewing her about how she wanted the best for her kids. And while that was going on, her daughter was murdered at a Seattle school. And it was the first time I ever went on TV live, and I burst out crying. That story really changed a lot of how I approached my job. 37 years at King TV and 42 years in broadcast news. And I dropped it like a hot balloon. I had had enough. I remember when I realized it was time to leave news. And I was with this new young female photographer. We were up north of Seattle, and a story we were working on was busted. And news came over the radio that there had been a school shooting in a suburb north of us. And she said, let's go, we're in place, let's do it, rock. And I was frozen in the car. And I told her, I can't go. I'm not going. That's it. I can't cover another school shooting. And I knew right then, I was done. I couldn't no longer do this job. I wish I had been able to spend more time with people that I met. I met some extraordinary people, but it was a day to day, boom, boom. You get there in the morning, you're running all day long, and you got to get something on at 5. So I would go, bam, bam, question, thank you, and never really got, I never took the time that I needed to take with people to get to know them. And I think that could have improved my life. Don't try to be somebody else. Don't try to emulate. Because men are successful in the job and had been, don't try to emulate them. Find your own voice. I don't want broadcast news to become, the woman's job, like nursing or being teachers, where they're being told what to do by men, being led by men, without the power. So they need the power. I never cooked. I never learned how to cook. So once I retired, that's what I did. I have learned to cook, and I've got some recipes, and I'm very happy putting on music and cooking and doing at-home things that I couldn't do before. I could never go to lunch with friends, because when you go into the newsroom, if you're there for the whole day, and there's no, I'll be back after lunch. You're running it down to the deadline. So that's something I've enjoyed doing, being with friends. There's no better job than TV news. I went everywhere. I did everything. I knew every inch of my state. I'm there first. I see it first. I get to tell people about it. And I wouldn't pick a different career. I loved it.